to our online Policing Your Community event for Elmbridge. One of my key responsibilities as your PCC is to represent your voice on policing. And I hope that tonight will be an opportunity for you to hear about the work that's happening both in Elmbridge and across the county, and also to ask your questions. Joining me here in the studio at Police HQ, Mount Brown in Guildford, is Chief Constable Tim de Meyer and Elmbridge Borough Commander Bert Dean. Now, we carried out a series of in-person meetings before Christmas, including in Walton-on-Thames in November. But we wanted to make sure that those of you who weren't able to get to the in-person meetings had an opportunity to hear about policing in your area and to ask your questions. So thank you for joining us this evening. Now, you're going to hear from the three of us about our priorities for policing in the county, and then of course a chance to ask your questions. And we are going to do everything we can to get through as many of those questions as possible, but if we don't have an opportunity to do so, then please do stay in touch, as we will make sure that we come back to you another time. Now, as your Police and Crime Commissioner, it's my responsibility to hold both the Chief Constable and the force to account for the service that you receive. Tim de Meyer has been in post now for almost 8 months, and I can assure you all that I made an excellent decision in appointing him. And it is an important time for policing in our county. Thanks to the work that Surrey Police has done to recruit our share of the government's extra 20,000 officers, and thanks also in particular to your council tax contributions over the years, Surrey Police has grown by 395 police officers, which makes the force the biggest it's ever been. It does mean that we have a younger workforce, and it will take time for these new recruits to be fully trained and to get out and about in our communities, which of course is where we all want to see them. As well as holding Surrey Police to account, I am also responsible for the Police and Crime Plan, which sets the direction for the force. And the key priorities within my Police and Crime Plan are protecting people from harm, working with residents so they feel safe, preventing violence against women and girls, ensuring safer Surrey roads, and strengthening the relationship between Surrey Police and you, our residents. In the last year, my office has awarded over £5 million to local services, and this has included more funding than ever before to prevent violence against women and girls. My office has also been working actively with the force to improve the response that you get to antisocial behaviour, but also to improve the service that you receive when you call 101, which is of course our non-emergency number. On a national level, I have taken a lead on issues relating to transport and road safety and the policing response to mental health, a key topic that is contributing to ensuring that the force and the police are able to respond to those who only the police can help. And I know it's something that the Chief Constable is going to talk a bit about and is taking a lead on in Surrey. Now, Surrey Police is an absolutely fantastic organisation, but the demands on its time are greater than ever. As the Commissioner, I also oversee the Surrey policing budget and the assets that are owned by Surrey Police. And I have to balance the cost pressures that we are all facing as individuals, as households, as organisations, with my goal to provide the Chief Constable with the resources that he needs in order to maintain that service that you receive. And it does include finding a further £17 to £20 million worth in savings over the next 4 years, and that is not going to be easy and is something that the Chief Constable will talk about. Times are tough for all of us, as I said, and asking the public for more money in their council tax is one of the most difficult tasks that I have as Police and Crime Commissioner. The Chief Constable is going to talk to you very shortly about his vision for the force, and that very much concentrates on what policing does best, which is fighting crime in our local communities and protecting people. And this is what you, the Surrey public, have told me that you want to see, and it's why I support Tim de Meyer's vision for Surrey. Now, I believe this plan will significantly boost service that we all receive in our communities right across the county. But in order to achieve it, we must maintain appropriate funding for our police teams, which is why I have to think incredibly carefully about making sound long-term financial plans. So, if you haven't already done so, I would like to invite you to have your say in my council tax consultation. It's currently live and it's going to be running until the end of this month. You can find the link in the comments section of this meeting. It's on my office's website and across our social media fields, so please do take a few minutes to fill it out. It won't take you any longer than 5 minutes. The survey asks you to consider whether you would support a £13 a year rise, £10, £11 or £12 a year, or a figure under £10. The Chief Constable has been absolutely clear with me that an increase below £10 on an average Band D property would mean further savings by Surrey Police. Whilst an increase of between £10 and £13 would mean that Surrey Police will be able to keep pace almost with inflation and keep any staff cuts to a minimum. The maximum increase of £13 would provide the Chief Constable with most of the resources he needs to achieve his plans for the force. But to be clear, Surrey Police will still need to find at least £17 million of savings over the next 4 years. So it is incredibly important that we make every efficiency we can to make sure the force is undergoing a transformation programme, and that is happening at the moment, and I am working very closely with the Chief and his officers on it. Your contributions that you make through council tax make an absolutely enormous difference, and for every pound of the precept set, it's an extra £500,000 that Surrey Police receive. So setting it is a task that I don't take lightly at all. Last year, the majority of those who took part in the consultation chose to pay the maximum, and I want to know whether you would be willing to do that again this year. You can scan the QR code that is on the screen right now. As I said, it will take you less than 5 minutes to fill out the survey. And I hope that you will agree, once you've listened to the Chief Constable, that the plans that he has in place are well worth funding. So I am going to hand over to Tim de Meyer now, who's going to talk through his vision for Surrey.
Thank you so much, Police and Crime Commissioner, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening and for your interest in policing in Surrey. I'm going to talk for 10 minutes or so about our plan for the force, and we aim very much to fight crime and to protect people, as the Police and Crime Commissioner has said. Now, this might seem a rather obvious aspiration for the police, but I do think it is important with determination to state our commitment to doing those things which only we can do and on which the residents of Surrey rely. I'm going to talk you through the 10 or so missions which go towards our overall vision of fighting crime, protecting people, earning the trust and confidence of people in Surrey, and ensuring that we are here for everyone who needs us. And the first point I'm going to cover is our commitment to preventing crime and solving problems. Now, Surrey has a long and well-established tradition in respect of crime prevention and problem solving. The force, long before my arrival, was rightly praised by her and His Majesty's Inspectorate in respect of our crime prevention and our problem solving, and the force was also fortunate to receive awards in that respect as well. What we need to do is take that experience and expertise in solving crime and preventing problems and apply it to those things which most need our attention now. And uppermost in my thoughts in this respect is the problem of violence against women and girls. If one takes domestic abuse, for example, we know that a victim of domestic abuse might suffer abuse on a great many occasions before they report it to the police. And it's absolutely vital that people feel that they can have confidence in reporting where they're a victim of domestic abuse, and that when they make a report, the service they receive from the officer is exemplary. We're seeing already our rate of arrest for domestic abuse increase dramatically, and the number of charges of domestic abuse offenders increase considerably, and I'm determined that that continues. Also, we're working hard with colleagues not only in the police service but also in the Crown Prosecution Service and other agencies to improve the service we provide to those who are victims of rape and sexual offences. The rate of charge and conviction for these offences across the United Kingdom is too low, and the same applies in Surrey. And we're taking a new approach in how we investigate these crimes, applying the government-backed Operation Soteria to improve our service to victims and also take a more suspect-focused approach in these cases, which we're confident will see an increase in the number of charges for rape and sexual offences. In relation to violence against women and girls, we are also adopting new practice from elsewhere in keeping women safe in public spaces. For example, Operation Shield takes learning in relation to behavioural detection and sees specially trained officers out and about on our nighttime economies, identifying potential perpetrators who might have travelled to an area for no purpose other than to target the vulnerable, and it takes the focus away from potential victims and instead onto the behaviour of potential perpetrators who might pose a risk to women. We need, obviously, you might think, to investigate crime thoroughly. I'm concerned by Surrey's position relative to other forces in respect of the number of people who we charge with criminal offences. Only we can investigate these crimes. The public rely on us to ensure that we follow the lines of inquiry that they identify and ultimately to bring the suspect to justice, whether that's a disposal out of court or being put before the court. And that's why recently we have set out our determination to focus very much on crimes such as shoplifting, which has been rather neglected by policing in recent years. And this, of course, has a really serious effect on public confidence. It simply isn't right that someone goes into a local shop and pays their own hard-earned money for goods only to see others stealing with impunity. And it is right that we ensure that the people who work in shops, whose hard work we rely in our communities, are protected and that they see people who steal from shops brought to justice in order that people feel safe. One of the things which I and the Policing and Crime Commissioner picked up on in our in-person visits across the boroughs was the sense of concern about general lawlessness. I mean things such as shoplifting, antisocial behaviour and open space drug dealing. And that's why, in partnership with our borough commanders, we're determined to identify those areas which really present the greatest difficulties in respect of things like antisocial behaviour and drug dealing, work in partnership with partners across different agencies and make sure we really improve public safety. We aim to ensure that we pursue criminals relentlessly, and that doesn't mean only swiftly making arrests in cases such as domestic abuse and shoplifting. It also means using all of our legal powers to seize and confiscate criminal money from organised criminals, ensuring that those crimes don't pay and that that money is instead taken and put to better use. You will see across Surrey Police in the months and years ahead dedicated high visibility operations using all police disciplines and tactics to target things such as shoplifting, violence against women and girls and rural crime in order to take the fight to criminals, pursue them relentlessly, bring them to justice and restore public confidence in policing. We need to ensure that we provide outstanding victim and witness care. Very often, whether in a case of stalking, harassment, child abuse or domestic abuse, the victim is often the only witness, and therefore we rely on their evidence to ensure that they are protected. The next victim is protected and the offender brought to justice. And that's why it's so important that our victims are satisfied with our services and we do all we possibly can to protect and look after them. And we have an outstanding victim and witness care unit which does that and which we're determined to support. We're all too aware of the damage to trust and confidence in policing of recent events relating to the misconduct and criminal acts of police officers over the last couple of years. And while Surrey Police is full of kind and competent police officers and police staff, we're not at all complacent about the potential for people to misconduct themselves, and therefore it's vital that we have robust arrangements for vetting, the handling of complaints and the investigation of misconduct, in order that people can be confident that they can trust their police service, on whom they rely when things for them are at their very worst. And that's why our plan sets out my determination to ensure that we act ethically and with the very highest standards. We want to reflect our communities, and for ours to be a police service where people not only feel included but positively feel they belong. It's a really competitive employment market in Surrey. The wages are relatively modest for police officers and police staff, and we need therefore to ensure that people feel recognised, appreciated for the extraordinary endeavours and public service they provide. Police officers and police staff literally run two things which most would run from, and they do things which many would not or could not do. And we can't provide the very best service to you if we recruit only from relatively small sections of society. We need to ensure that whatever someone's sex or gender, religious or racial background, they feel confident that they can apply to Surrey Police, be successful in their application, belong in Surrey Police and fulfil their potential as great crime fighters, whatever role they might occupy. The Police and Crime Commissioner has already mentioned the challenges that we have in respect of our financial position. And I'm very clear to officers and staff that the money that's been given to us was at some point earned by someone, given then to the state through central or local taxation. It might have gone instead to education or health or defence, but that particular pound has been entrusted to the police, and it's imperative therefore that we are efficient and spend the money entrusted to us to the greatest possible public value. And that means our contracts, our systems, our processes, our technology all have to be as efficient and effective as possible, in order that should we have to make savings, we're able to do so by improving our processes and not by reducing the services in any way which would affect the people who rely on us most. I'm determined that we will be here for everyone who needs us when they need us, and that officers and staff very clearly put the service of others before our own self-interests. And that means responding promptly and according to need. His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary has rightly drawn attention to our performance in respect of call handling. We had already identified concerns in this area. Our 999 and 101 performance were not what the residents and businesses of Surrey deserve and expect. Performance in this area is already improving dramatically, and we're seeing us answer calls faster, respond to them faster, and we offer a very broad range of accessibility into Surrey Police through traditional telephone and newer digital services. But it's vital that we continue to improve this, because the public expect us to answer the phone quickly, to respond swiftly, to make arrests, follow lines of inquiry and look after victims. But one of the challenges we've had in recent years has been the demand on police officers and staff to deal with people in mental health crisis, most of whom would, to be frank, be better served by people with real expertise in those areas. And a police officer with coercive powers is not always the most reassuring public servant to be deployed to someone in mental health crisis. And that's why I, senior colleagues and partners are working together on the Right Care, Right Person initiative, which over the coming months and years will develop to ensure that people in mental health crisis get service of a mental health professional, and that officers are instead freed up to respond to the domestic abuse, shoplifting, rural crime and burglary that only they can deal with. We need to ensure that we're resilient and that we are prepared. Surrey has a proud tradition of policing large public events, notably the Epsom Derby and also dynamic events such as protests on the M25. And we need to ensure that we are trained, resilient, sufficient and ready to respond both to those large planned events, but also anything else which modern society and policing might throw at us. And that means ensuring that we're ready not only for those type of incidents, but also more modern threats such as cyber attacks. And finally, policing is tough. As I've said, many could not or would not want to do what a member of police staff or a police officer does. They see things every day which most people fortunately don't see in a lifetime, and therefore it's vital that I and colleagues look after my workforce in order that they can look after you. And that's why our plan mentions our determination to keep ourselves and each other as healthy, fit and safe as we can, not only because that's a good thing to do, but mainly because we need to make sure that we're ready always to serve you. We've been very fortunate to benefit from a great increase in the number of officers that we've got, and we're determined to keep those numbers up and also to work really hard to maintain the numbers of police staff, particularly in our control rooms and contact centres and police community support officers. So if you are public spirited or know someone who is and are a good communicator and want to apply to become one of our PCSOs or to work in our contact centre, you'd be very welcome. And I'll conclude there and hand over to Inspector Dean, who's going to talk to you about local matters.
Thank you, sir. Good evening. A very warm welcome from me. I'm Bert Dean. I'm the police inspector that has responsibility for the policing within the Borough of Elmbridge. It's a great opportunity for me just to outline this evening what some of my priorities are locally, but also how effective the local police team are that police Elmbridge. So just to give you a brief makeup really regarding my team, because people often ask the question, how many officers have you got, how do they operate, and who do you have? So just to outline on my team, you have me as the Borough Commander within the team, and then I've got 2 local sergeants. So you'll be able to see a slide here which just highlights that I've got Kelly, who is the officer on the left of the screen covering the west of the borough, and Nick, who covers the east. 2 sergeants, both with extensive experience in policing, bringing that into the Safer Neighbourhood team. The core role of the neighbourhood team is around chronic issues and engaging with the community, and also targeted policing in key areas where we've got those issues. So to support that, I've got my 6 police officers who you'll see in the centre, covering most of the areas. Each of them has been assigned an area within the borough to focus on in relation to the problem solving that goes on, but they will police the whole area as well. And then in the red circles, you see I've got 2 youth officers. So I've got Phil and Steph, who do a lot of engagement work with the schools, with those charities and organisations supporting the work of young people to try and divert young people who come to our attention away from criminal activity. And then you'll see that I've got 4 PCSOs there. Now, for those of you who were at the event in person, you'll see that we've got 2 additional PCSOs on there. So I'm really pleased that we've got Ryan and Cassie on our team, who are already making great waves within the team and in the community, dealing with local issues. And then within our policing framework, we've got a number of other teams that support us in the wider policing. So we have our neighbourhood policing team, who in many ways are response and investigation teams. So they're the officers who will be covering the area 24/7, responding to 999 calls, investigating crime and carrying out proactive policing as well in the area. And as it says there as well, we've got our investigation teams. So those are our teams who are specialist investigators, detectives, looking at local crimes, looking at serious crime and complex crime. Then also our ops command teams, who are officers who are the armed response units, as well as our traffic officers and additional teams as well. We also are supported by our custody teams and specialist crimes. So when there are serious incidents where perhaps major crime teams come in to investigate, those are specialist teams that get involved, as well as our sexual offences teams as well. We can't do our work without the intelligence that comes in from officers and also the local community. We rely heavily on community intelligence that comes through the links that we have with the local community, and that is assessed and graded by our intelligence team, and then is fed out to the local officers so that we can then carry out meaningful actions, interventions to reduce those who are having the highest impact within the local community. Having been the Borough Commander now for 4 years, I feel that I've got a pretty good understanding of our local communities and also the issues that we see, and that's why my priorities that I've set are centred around the needs of the community within Elmbridge. You'll see there that one of my key priorities is in relation to reducing burglaries and vehicle crime. This is something which as a force would be echoed across most boroughs, but Elmbridge, for one reason or another, seems to be quite prominent in being the victim of burglaries and vehicle crime, whether that's our proximity to London, the high affluence that we see in some areas, or criminals just coming into that area and then leaving on the road network, impacting on our local community. Our figures at the moment are generally just slightly above our force average, so Elmbridge does seem to have a few more than other areas, but we continue to target that. And when it comes to, as the Chief was talking about, our detailed investigations, I ensure that actually every single burglary is thoroughly investigated and that every opportunity to identify who has committed it is found, and we do that work on a daily basis when we see burglaries being reported. So in addition to that, in reducing the burglaries and vehicle crime, for me it's around antisocial behaviour. As a borough, we've seen at least 200 fewer reports in relation to antisocial behaviour last year, which is a real good thing to see. And I'd like to see that continue, but obviously we would encourage people to report antisocial behaviour and not put up with that kind of behaviour which impacts on them and is causing harassment, alarm or distress to them and is an ongoing issue. We'll work with our local partners to tackle those issues. We, the police, have our powers, but we rely very much on the additional powers that our partners have, and also look to the community to support us in tackling those issues locally. Elmbridge is a borough that does have organised crime. As I say, it'd be wrong to think that we didn't. We do see various organised crime taking place within the borough. This might be county lines, and we see drug dealers coming into the borough, targeting some of our most vulnerable people and carry out criminal activity, whether it's the drug dealing itself or looking to move money around within the borough. When we look at our burglaries and our vehicle crime that I've mentioned, often again that is organised crime groups coming into the area to commit those crimes. So again, we look to target that through our policing tactics, using other teams to support us in that, building on the intelligence we've got and working with our communities to help them know what the problems are and how they can take a step to try and reduce the risk of becoming victims of crime. Naturally, one of my key aims is that we catch and prosecute more criminals, and we've had some very good results in the past year. We've had one person who's been charged with over 30 conspiracy for burglaries, 15 of those within the borough itself. So he was a key impactor on our community, and he's currently behind bars. We also target a number of drink drivers, and from that we often find people who are bringing drugs into the community. And again, we've got a number of people who my team are currently investigating who have been suspected of possessing drugs with the intention to supply it to local residents. From the neighbourhood side, it's around tackling and solving those chronic issues that I've mentioned. There are some areas that really are just drawing too much antisocial behaviour or crime, and we will work with our partners to tackle that. One of the areas that's been highlighted for a while now is the antisocial behaviour in St John's Estate in Walton and also in Walton Town Centre, and we're pleased to have received some Safer Streets funding from the government that is being put to good use through the work from Elmbridge Borough Council to look at how we can best spend that money to improve the area and reduce the antisocial behaviour that's been reported there. I've mentioned about target activity, and my team will often be out and about targeting our most prominent criminals in the area, knowing who they are, targeting them to reduce the impact that they have locally. And then obviously one of the other key aspects of local policing is about engaging with our communities. This obviously is just one way in which we can give you an update as to what's going on, but for me it's about officers getting out into the community, engaging with people, finding out what the issues are, identifying if we, the police, are best placed to tackle those issues, or whether it's a case of raising those at the partnership meetings we have to discuss them and come to a solution that we can put into place. When it comes to that engagement, we know that we've got to find the right format to engage with the broadest number of people that we can. We appreciate that we do use our Facebook and social media, but that's not always something that people utilise. And so it's getting into those public spaces, into the libraries, into the food banks, into those community areas where we can engage with people on a more regular basis. And again, Chief Constable's mentioned about PCSO recruitment, but for us, PCSOs are critical in being that engagement with the community. So I would love to have more PCSOs who will be engaging with our community, enabling my officers to spend that time that they need targeting the criminals, arresting them and bringing them to justice to reduce the volume of crime in the area. And hopefully by carrying out those factors, then we'll be able to see an increase in the trust and the confidence that the community have within the local policing team. I've mentioned a number of the areas that we've had some good results in, just mentioning the burglary as one example, the drink drive arrests, and we carry out a number of operations throughout the year where we target that. But there is a whole host of local actions that we've taken which have improved areas that we've done with the local community, whether that's antisocial behaviour in a particular road or looking at speed issues in particular roads. And there was one at Rydens Road where again that was raised to us as a local issue, which we put some tactics in place, working with partners to try and reduce the issues there. So the local team is there for you, and I would encourage anyone to make contact with us if there are issues, whether that's through the 101 or reporting it online, and that will be picked up by my team. But what can you expect from your local team? Well, there are a number of things that I would be expecting my officers to be able to give to you. We want to understand and deal with what matters locally, what matters most to you. Obviously, if it's not a police matter, we will direct you to the right agency who will be able to support that. We want to listen to your local concerns, to be at the right meetings, at the right opportunity to hear what you have to say. We want to proactively tackle long-term the problems with you. I'm never one to want to put a sticking plaster over an issue when actually we want to get to the root cause of that problem, fully understand it so that we can then tackle it and remove that. Naturally, we want to treat every person fairly, giving them the time that they need to raise their concerns to us. We want to be visible in our local community. So this is about being in the right place at the right time. Is this going to mean you're going to see a lot of police officers walking the beat? Well, naturally, that's one way I would like them to get around. But with the demands placed upon us, you will often see them going around in cars as well. But if we can advertise our meeting places and our key times that we're going to be there, you'll be able to come along and have a conversation with us. For me, we need to use our data effectively. Our resources need to be in the right place at the right time. So when you take an issue like burglary, for me, it's about identifying the hotspots and making sure those hotspots are policed, using historic data and current data to direct the officers. Keeping people informed and updated is key. And again, do we get this right all the time? No. Can we improve? Yes. There's always an opportunity for us to strive for excellence, to make sure that actually we are keeping people informed and updated. Keeping those promises where we say we keep them updated with what's going on with their case or the issue that they've raised to us. And naturally, as a local police team, we'll play a key role in the local partnership. There are so many partners that we work with across Elmbridge. This might be the Environment Agency, Surrey County Council, Elmbridge Borough Council, local charities, Elmbridge Can. There's a whole host of people and community groups that we work with, and we want to work with more to understand their needs and their concerns and tackle the issues head on together so that we actually get the right results. So that's a brief overview as to what is going on locally. Obviously, if people have got other things they want to raise, they can raise that as a question to us. But I do appreciate we've got some questions that wish to be raised. So if I can pass back to you, PCC, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you to both of you. Thank you for all the questions that are coming in on Facebook and on YouTube. If you'd like to ask a question, we've got about 25 minutes to go through questions. Anything we don't get to, I will make sure that we get to them after. Now, some of these questions, some of the points have actually just been addressed, either by you, Inspector, or by the Chief Constable. But let's go through them. The first question that I've got is Karen from Molesey. And Karen asks, what is being done about motorcycles being stolen in the town? And this is Molesey. Descriptions have been given to the police, but there doesn't seem to be a visible response from the force.
Thank you. I'll take that question as it covers Elmbridge, as it covers Molesey. The theft of motorcycles is certainly something that we've seen an increase in, not just in the Molesey area. We've seen thefts from Walton, we've seen it in Weybridge, Cobham as well. But Elmbridge isn't alone on this issue. And again, it comes down to some of the intelligence that we're building to get the bigger picture as to who might be coming into the area to do this. We have identified a number of people who've been involved in this. We have actually carried out a number of arrests, and there are a number of people who are on bail, so they've got to return to the police station at a later date whilst the investigation continues. So we have made some good ground in targeting those who are involved in this, but naturally there are others who perhaps we don't know about. I think one of the biggest challenges we find, and I find this on a daily basis, we're so grateful to the wideness of CCTV in the area that we get a vast amount of digital data coming in, which gives us the opportunity to identify those who might be involved. But when someone is wearing a motorcycle helmet or a balaclava, often we find it very challenging to identify who they are. Sometimes if the motorcycle is recovered with a bit of clothing or a helmet, we can look at forensics in relation to that. But other times there are cases where we just have to be open and honest with victims to say that we haven't got any lines of inquiry. But in a lot of our cases, that doesn't mean that the case always stops there. We might finalise that one, but sometimes we'll get some intelligence or some information from another investigation, which then allows us to link the person on that one to some historic offences that we would then look to arrest them and interview them regarding to see whether we can prosecute them for that offence. And there have been a number of occasions where we've done that. In relation to motorcycle theft specifically, there are tactics that people can employ to try and reduce the risk of that. You'll find a host of information on our website. But we are seeing that criminals are going around, in some cases with bolt croppers, even battery-powered angle grinders to cut chains. And so it's about reporting that if people see anyone acting suspiciously, or even in some cases we've seen people on CCTV with bolt croppers sitting outside of their rucksack. We just encourage people to report that on 999. If they think there's a crime in progress, phone us. We will look to deploy, should we have a unit available, to be able to come to that, and we'll look to investigate it, and if we can, catch the perpetrators and bring them to justice.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Karen. Alexandra, who has contacted us on Facebook, thank you, Alexandra, asks a good question. For context, does the precept consultation questionnaire state what increase per household would enable Surrey Police to maintain the same level of cover without needing to find efficiencies? Well, Alexandra, the reality is we will need to find £17 million worth of savings, even if the maximum amount of £13 is set. So to give you a bit of background on that, £13 is what the government has set this year as its expectation of the amount that police and crime commissioners across England and Wales will set as the amount of council tax extra. We have a duty to go out to consultation. I think it's really important that we get your views on it as well. But the government is basing its figures on us each raising council tax by £13 on an average Band D property. Even if it is raised by that much, efficiencies will still need to be made. Chief Constable, do you want to talk a bit more about the work that we're doing? I'm not sure if there's much more. You've already talked about it, but that sort of importance of constantly making sure we're getting value for money.
Yes, and thank you, Alexandra. It's a very important question, and I'm not sure I set out clearly enough why it is that we need to make savings, and it's quite simply because the police service is subject to the same wider economic pressure as any other organisation, such as inflation in goods and services and increases in wages. So even though we're very grateful for the money which comes to us through local and central taxation, the stark reality is that does not currently keep pace with the demands that are upon us in terms of the things I've just described. That's why one of the key elements of my plan is to focus very keenly on our productivity, whether that's the value for money in relation to the contracts for our goods and services, how efficiently we use our IT systems. But about 80% of our overall budget goes on people. So the ability to save money is actually extremely difficult without reducing numbers of staff and officers, which is of course very much the last thing that we would wish to do and which we would avoid at all costs. So that's why, together with colleagues in Sussex and elsewhere, we're always looking at how it is that we can collaborate on services in such a way that we can save money in a way the public won't notice, whilst maintaining the critical services that the public very much do notice and rely on.
Great, thank you very much. Alexandra, if you do have other questions specifically relating to that, there is an FAQ page on my website which you can have a look at, which does answer a lot of questions specifically about the precept and about the levels. Jules on Facebook has asked a common question. How about getting the streetlights back on? It's so intimidating when it's pitch dark, walking back from a night out. It's just not safe to go out anymore because of the switch off after midnight. Well, first of all, Jules, I'll start this, which is that streetlights is actually the responsibility of the County Council. We've been working very closely with the County Council. I know that district and borough councillors have been in conversation as well about it. It is a difficult one. I've been very clear that I think that the streetlights where residents want them on should be on. I think that, I mean, we are very lucky, aren't we, in Surrey? We are the 4th safest county in the country. We're the safest county in the southeast by some distance. But that perception of safety, whether you're a man or a woman, is really, really important. And I understand, as a woman who is, often out late when the street lights aren't on, that it can be an issue. I wonder, Borough Commander, whether you want to talk a bit about, because the rules have changed. Surrey County Council recently announced that they're no longer going to require police officers, excuse me, to take a sort of a view on whether they should be on or not, and that should be dealt with, I believe, by the County Council. And where residents want the streetlights on, I think they should be. But can you talk a bit about the work that your team do more generally to make sure that people are safe and that women are safe?
Yes, thank you. So, I mean, obviously streetlights is a key issue for a number of people, and there's a tool that's been available to the public for quite some time called Street Safe, which is an opportunity for people to log down their local concerns in a local area. It's probably fair to say that the responses to that have been quite low. They're not massive numbers of people responding to that. So, but what I do often see, the concerns being raised by the community in relation to that is to do with a lot of the environmental areas, the concerns about not actually feeling safe in an area. Naturally, we would look to have officers out in those hotspot locations if there's a concern in relation to antisocial behaviour, or there's been a crime series or a crime concern in that local area. But on the occasions that I have engaged with Surrey County Council, we have had streetlights being turned on in particular areas, just so that it does provide the additional lighting and making people feel much safer. The other areas I just mentioned is in relation to the Joint Action Group. So that's a group that we hold at Elmbridge Borough Council that I chair with local partners, looking at those areas where people don't feel safe or we have those common issues. And again, we look at what changes need to be brought about to really give people that opportunity to say what the concerns are and what we can do to tackle that. So one example, and I've mentioned about the Safer Streets funding already, but Druitt's Court car park in Walton Town Centre is quite a dark car park, and there's investment going into there to try and secure the Park Mark safety scheme, which is a scheme that a number of car parks have signed up to make sure that there is good lighting, that there's CCTV, that stairwells are not dingy, and people don't feel unsafe there. So there are a number of things that are taking place across the borough, and the Joint Action Group is a meeting that happens once a month where we discuss antisocial behaviour and particular areas of concern. And then partners go away, or the police go away with actions to try and resolve some of those issues, whether it's a case of cutting back vegetation, whether it's about increasing patrols, whether it's about knocking on doors and finding out how big the issue actually is. So that does happen. And again, if people have got particular concerns about areas, please tell us, because we don't know what we don't know.
We've got about 15 minutes and more questions than we can get through, so I'm going to try and power through some of these. Sally on Facebook asks, it looks as though the draft Surrey Vision Zero road safety strategy could be quite demanding on police resources. What priority will you be giving to that? So again, for a bit of context, so Surrey Vision Zero road safety is being led by Surrey County Council, but working very closely with my office and also with the force and others as well. And the Vision Zero is around a vision for 0 deaths on our roads, something which I know the force cares an awful lot about. It's within my police and crime plan around road safety, and I also have the national lead for PCCs around road safety, and I sit on the Road Safety Trust, where we talk an awful lot about this nationally and the steps that we can take, but this is a Surrey-specific measure. Personally, I've been very clear that I will push back against mandatory blanket 20 mile an hour limits across the county. I don't think that's the answer, and it does put an awful lot of resource on police in order to police that. But generally, obviously, we're all in favour of fewer deaths and preferably no deaths. There are 7 deaths in the UK a day on our roads. It's far too many. I don't know if you want to talk a bit about what's happening in Elmbridge in terms of safety on the roads.
Yes. So within Elmbridge, we've got a casualty reduction officer, a guy called Nick, who works very closely with me, looking at certain areas, certain roads where there are concerns. But there's also a central community casualty reduction team who can deploy to particular areas, along with a team called the Vanguard team, who do a lot of work in relation to antisocial driving and also targeting those people who are driving on the road without insurance, without tax, without MOT, basically people who shouldn't be on the road, as well as disqualified drivers. So that's an intelligence-led policing operation that we run on a regular basis. My local officers, again, are daily out there stopping vehicles, engaging with motorists, dealing with issues like speeding, speaking to motorists about speed, carrying out breath tests, carrying out drug wipe tests. And again, it's an area that I've mentioned already, but we do get some good results off that. I've also had concerns raised to me by some of the local councillors, which we've looked to address. Fact finding. Does a road actually have a speeding issue or not? Is it a perception or is it fact? So looking at the data to then direct what the next steps are. And we work closely with Surrey County Council, and we've got a traffic management team in Surrey Police who I link in with on a regular basis to make sure that our roads can be as safe as they can and that we're policing the right areas at the right time.
Right, thank you. Chief, is there anything you want to add on road safety?
Just one extra point, and that's relation to the criminal use of our roads. And I think it links back to the earlier question about motorcycling. It's so important that whether in respect of burglary, car theft, motorcycle theft, or plant theft in rural areas, that we get the information, the intelligence and the evidence that we need, not only to investigate those individual crimes, but also to put together such a body of information that we can mount a proactive operation against the thieves who engage in this sort of activity, because of course they often then drive extremely dangerously as well, and not only commit crime but put innocent people at risk. And that's another reason why I'm so determined that we're going to mount these larger scale operations, so that we don't just rely on the reports coming in, but also that we more proactively catch people in the act of committing their crimes.
Thank you. The next question is a former officer, Simon, who says that he was the NSO sergeant for Elmbridge in 2010. He says there were plenty of officers on the beat then, wants to know where they've all gone, but his specific question is, where are your staff? Not a single officer or even PCSO walks any beat, most crime filed within minutes of being reported. All crime is skyrocketing across each division, yet the precept could be raised. We pay the highest council tax precept for policing in England and Wales, and it doesn't appear that we are getting value for money. I think there's quite a lot there we can probably debunk between the three of us. Do you want to start us off in terms of locally?
Yeah, I mean, locally, good evening, Sam. So locally, I've explained the officers that we have. Policing has changed in many ways, and it is more complex than it was. And I think about the cases where my officers arrest someone for a drugs-related offence, and there is the evidence that we need to analyse, which includes phone data, which is vast, for officers to spend time to go through, as well as the case files they need to put together. So there will be times when officers are not out on the street, or not all the officers that we have in the team will be out and about. But there's also that constant demand where officers are dealing with issues. It was actually the former Chief Constable of Sussex, Giles York, who said that really the days of officers walking a beat are pretty much no longer here, because the demand is constant and officers are going very much from one incident to another. So there's some real challenges behind that. And there are more crime types that we investigate, I would say now, than we have ever done. So there is an increased demand, which has been mentioned already this evening.
Yeah, I think so. And we know that over half of crime happens now online, and happens to the very vulnerable, whether it's those who are elderly and living alone are being targeted via their computer or via their phone or their landline, and of course are very young as well at the other end of the scale, who are being targeted by some of the worst offenders that we have, and of course an officer on the beat isn't able to support those. Chief, is there anything that you want to add to?
Yes, well, I think Simon makes some important points which I wouldn't too readily dismiss. Nevertheless, I'm not sure it's accurate that crime is skyrocketing across every division. If one takes, for example, rates of burglary not only in Surrey but across the United Kingdom since 2010, those have fallen precipitously for various reasons relating to the type of property which is now targeted, the prevalence of things such as ring doorbells, which make burglary less attractive and more easily to detect, and many other considerations. We have seen other types of crime increase, notably rape and sexual offences and domestic abuse. But we know, of course, that that's almost certainly due to increased reporting and the confidence to report those crimes, which is to be encouraged. I do agree completely with the value of high visibility policing, and in particular hotspot policing. And recently the policing minister made clear his expectation that police forces adopt this approach, and therefore I'm determined that in Surrey we very precisely identify where the hotspots are that would most benefit from not only high visibility policing but the engagement which follows in those areas. But the Borough Commander is quite right to mention the changing nature of crime. Almost every crime we investigate now, whether that's theft, domestic abuse, rape or otherwise, somehow features some sort of digital device in the investigation. And that has made criminal investigation very much more complicated than might have been the case a couple of decades ago. And of course, it's also so that we have to investigate crimes which have an online element to them, particularly those which feature indecent images and the abuse of children. And Surrey, compared with most forces, has an extremely efficient unit which deals with those especially serious crimes, but which the public wouldn't necessarily be aware of, but mean not only that we bring people to justice locally and in some cases internationally, but also that we protect local children and vulnerable people from that sort of abuse.
Excellent. Thank you, both of you. We've got less than 10 minutes to go. So this question from Victoria on Facebook, and I will say also that we've had far more questions in than we can deal with tonight. So the force will respond to all questions. If not tonight, then we will get back to you. Victoria has asked, again, around perception. People want to see PCSOs and officers on the beat and not out in cars. You've talked a little bit about this already. Public perception of effectiveness should not be underestimated. And I think that's true. And we all understand public perception is enormously important for confidence, to make sure people are reporting. Of course, we've got to balance that with where the crime is.
Yeah, and obviously the Chief has mentioned about the hotspot policing side of things. And I've been in neighbourhood policing for many, many years, and for me it is about being in the right place at the right time. That's always one of the key mantras in relation to neighbourhood policing. So, when I say it's much harder for officers to be out on the beat, that's the village Bobby image, Dixon of Dock Green, is very distant from where we are now. But the officers will be out and about in those areas where there are the issues or where the concerns are. When you look at crime investigation, if there's been a burglary in a road, our expectation is the officers carry out a number of inquiries down that road, engaging with the community, not just to ask them about the crime or whether they were witness to it, but actually are there any other issues that the local community have. That's a key opportunity for us to engage with the local community. And I'm also, whilst I mentioned about foot patrol, but for me, cycle patrol is a great way of getting around. It's one that I have been known to do and still do, because you can cover great ground, you can still stop and engage with people, you can have eye contact with the community, you can stop, people can flag you down, you can have a conversation. And again, that's something which I encourage my team to go out and do, because it's just another way of getting around, getting out to community, getting out to other areas and finding out what's going on.
Great, thank you. Jamie on Facebook, Walton is a disgrace for van and house burglary. And Jules also thinks that burglary has got worse in Walton. You've talked a little bit about saying the situation is improving, and we know that burglary has been. Do you want to talk a bit about Walton in particular?
I mean, obviously the question there is specifically around vans being broken into, and again, we are aware that there have been a number of vans that have been broken into in some of the areas, predominantly around some of the hotel car parks. We know that there are organised crime groups who come into the area. They target Spelthorne as well and Runnymede, as well as other counties, going into car parks, targeting vans overnight, where people have got their tools in their van because they're working on a job locally, and then someone wakes up in the morning and finds that their whole livelihood and all that they need for the day has been taken. Again, a very frustrating crime to read about, and my heart goes out to the victims who suffer that. Have we seen an increase in that? I would have to look at the exact data to see whether we have or not. But again, for us, it's about working with the hotels to try and get those messages out to people staying there that, think about where they're parking, thinking about what they've got within their vans. In relation to the burglaries, again, we've seen burglaries in Walton, and a lot of these investigations, they're not going to be solved overnight. A lot of them take in-depth investigation to build a picture as to what's going on, linking it to other offences in the area, and trying to find that one little nugget of evidence that then gets our suspect and links them all together. So again, we give the advice to the community about how they can try and stay safe. We link it with Neighbourhood Watch as well. And again, if people have got concerns, they can send them in to me, and obviously we'll look to address those. But there is a lot of work being done, not just visible patrols, but also unmarked patrols being carried out as well, trying to target those areas where those crimes are taking place.
Thank you. Yes, of course.
Just make one point. The public can really help in this respect, and the Borough Commander's absolutely right that the crimes aren't necessarily solved overnight, but whether it's the automatic number plate recognition which shows organised groups of thieves going in and out of areas, whether it's the suspicious activity reports using our portal to send in CCTV footage which might have been captured or taken from a device which could be the missing link in evidence, or anything else you can think of, might build the overall picture which, whilst it might not solve that particular crime, could be what we need to mount an organised crime fighting operation against a particular group, and therefore really helpful, because if we don't get them for your crime, I assure you we will in the end get them for something.
Thank you very much. We've only got a couple of minutes left. There's a question here which I think, Chief, is a good one for us to try and address. So another question from Facebook. Police can arrest and prosecute more criminals, but these judges are letting them off too lightly. Probation, a fine, suspended sentence, justice system is now a joke. Judges are not punishing these criminals hard enough. This is a real challenge, isn't it? Because a lot of this goes obviously well beyond the remit of policing. We work very closely with the criminal justice system wider. I chair the Criminal Justice Board for Surrey, which brings together the CPS, courts, prisons, probation, youth justice, and of course policing. There is a related question which I'm going to link in from Debbie on YouTube, which asks about specifically how we're improving how we work with the CPS on rape cases. But I wonder if you could talk for a moment, Chief Constable, about that wider criminal justice piece, the challenges that it is seeing, and what policing can do within our context as part of it.
Thank you. It's an excellent question. I'm not sure that judges would agree with that characterisation, not least because, whilst I'm no expert in this field, I'm given to understand that judges operate under stricter and stricter sentencing guidelines, which in many more cases restrict their decision making and favour a custodial sentence than might previously have been the case. And you might say that that's borne out by the fact that the prisons, as has recently been reported, are very much close to capacity. So the police are certainly catching lots of criminals, and a great many of them are being sent to prison. Otherwise, we wouldn't be that position nationally. The more pressing concern in the short term for me is the backlog in the criminal justice system. It's absolutely right that investigators deal with cases on their merits. It's not for the detective to second guess what the availability of the courts might be. They have to investigate the crime thoroughly, pursue the criminal relentlessly, and serve the victim tirelessly, and in so doing put someone before the court. But the PCC is right that as a group of agencies we are concerned about the backlog in the system and how hard it is that we have to work to keep victims on board with our cases whilst they wait for justice. But it's so important that they do, because by taking that opportunity to bring that offender to justice, not only do we protect that victim, of course, we protect the next one as well. And in a great many cases are able to rehabilitate people without their going to prison. On the matter of the CPS, it used to be the case that it was for the police to decide whether or not someone should be charged with an offence. However, in about 2002, as I remember, the rules changed, and in most cases it's now only with the Crown Prosecution Service authority that we can charge someone. And that's certainly the case in rape and sexual offences. We work very hard with our colleagues in the Crown Prosecution Service to ensure that we get advice from them at the earliest possible stage of an investigation in order to ensure that we are addressing the points that they would want to see addressed in any charging decision. And I am pleased to report that we've seen what was an unacceptably long delay in getting a Crown Prosecution Service charging decision brought down considerably, and I commend and thank CPS colleagues for that. But it's absolutely vital in those cases in particular we work with the lawyers to ensure that we charge more people and give a better chance of conviction ultimately than has previously been the case.
Thank you. I'm going to go to one more question. I know we are in danger of going over time, but I do think this is an important one, Chief, and I want to give the opportunity because I do think it speaks to confidence. Rosemary has asked on YouTube, how do you check your officers' behaviour?
It's a really important question, and the first thing I should mention is vetting, because we vet people very thoroughly before they come into the organisation across a range of behavioural, criminal, and in some cases even financial considerations to make sure not only their behaviour and character are exemplary, but they are at the lowest possible risk of corruption. And policing has also recently embarked on a re-vetting of many of its staff, which includes looking again at anything which might have been revealed about officer and staff behaviour over their service. We are in no sense complacent about standards, particularly in respect of honesty and the abuse of authority for any sexual purpose. And whilst I'm always sorry and saddened to see cases where officers commit that sort of egregious misconduct, there is plenty of evidence that Surrey is very efficient through our professional standards department and our anti-corruption unit in rooting them out. And I hope one of the things you might be heartened by, Rosemary, is that whether in relation to dismissals or final written warnings that people might get for their misconduct, it almost always relates to reports from colleagues themselves. Colleagues can report confidentially or openly on their concerns about officers' behaviour against the standards of professional conduct and do so regularly. However, looking on the bright side, in the overwhelming majority of investigations that we carry out, whether of public complaints or police officer internal complaints, we find that the officer has behaved actually very well, which is generally reassuring. But it's a combination of confidential reporting, training of every officer in ethics and standards, vetting, and explicit and express reporting by officers on their colleagues, as well as making sure that we've got a robust public complaint system where people can not only complain but have appropriate rights of appeal to the PCC's office where they're not content with the outcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for joining us. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. The force will be answering all questions that have been left. If you do have other questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Thank you very much to Bert Dean, Elmbridge Borough Commander, to our Chief Constable, Tim de Meyer, and to you for joining. We hope to see you very soon. Have a safe evening.